In October 2014, I found a snowmobile boot print in the mud outside Cabin 7. Just one. No trail leading to it, no trail leading away from it, like something had stepped down once and then lifted straight back up into the air. It hadn't snowed yet. There was no snowmobile on the property. I stood there for probably 5 full minutes just staring at it like it was going to explain itself. It didn't. I want to tell you I brushed it off, because that's what you do, right? You find one weird thing and you talk yourself out of it. And I did brush it off for about 11 more days. Then things stopped being brushable. This isn't a story about a monster jumping out of the woods. I never saw anything with claws or glowing eyes or any of that. What I saw was worse in a boring, quiet way, and it's why I still keep a light on in the hallway of my apartment 9 years later. So some background. My name's not important. I'll just say I'm a guy. I was 29 that fall, and I'd been doing seasonal caretaker work for a family named the Hendersons, who owned a stretch of lakefront cabins in northern Wisconsin. Rain Lake Cabins, that's not the real name, but it's close enough. 11 cabins total, a boat launch, a little office building, and a maintenance shed. In the summer, it was a full-blown resort. Families, kids doing cannonballs off the dock, the whole thing. But by mid-October, everybody clears out except deer hunters, and even they thin out fast once it gets cold. The Hendersons paid me and my buddy Rich to winterize the place, drain the pipes, board up windows that needed it, fix the roof on cabin 3 that had been leaking since August, haul out the docks before ice, that kind of thing. It was supposed to be about 3 weeks of work, living on site in the caretaker's cabin, which was cabin 1, right by the office. Rich and I had known each other since high school. He was the kind of guy who'd fix anything with duct tape and confidence. Not always successfully, but he tried. We'd done this kind of seasonal labor together before. A golf course the year before that, a Christmas tree farm before that. We got along fine. He had a dog, a mutt named Copper, half lab, half something, and Copper came with us because Rich didn't have anywhere else to leave him. The property itself, I want to paint this a little because it matters later. Rain Lake sat at the end of a 2-mile gravel road off the county highway. No other houses on that road. The lake itself was maybe a half-mile across, ringed by pine woods that the Hendersons didn't own, but that just kind of blended into their property with no real fence line. Cabin 7 was the farthest one out, tucked back from the water and the trees, and it was also the oldest cabin on the property, built sometime in the 1950s according to the Hendersons, before they even bought the place. It didn't get booked much because it didn't have the lake view the others had. Mostly hunters used it. First week was totally normal. I want to stress that because I think it's important for you to understand this didn't start as a horror story. It started as just work. We got up early, we worked till it got dark around 6, we ate dinner, usually something out of a can heated on the stove because neither of us could cook worth a damn, and we watched movies on Rich's laptop until we passed out. Copper slept at the foot of Rich's bed. It was quiet in the good way. No cell signal to speak of, which honestly felt like a relief at the time. Not a horror movie setup. I remember thinking, genuinely, this is a nice break from my life. We drained pipes in cabins 2 through 6 without any issues. Fixed the roof on 3, started hauling the dock sections up onto the shore, which is brutal, heavy work, and by day 6 we were both sore and tired in that satisfying way where you sleep good at night. Old man Henderson, the owner, drove out once that first week to drop off supplies and a check. He was maybe 70. Still ran the place with his wife, who mostly did the books. He mentioned cabin 7 needed the pipes drained too, and the chimney checked before we left. Said hunters had complained about a draft in there last season. Said it kind of offhand, like it wasn't a big deal. And then he said something I didn't think about again until later. He said, Don't worry about the cellar under 7. Nobody uses it. Just leave it be. I said sure, no problem, and didn't ask why a 50s era cabin even had a cellar, because why would you ask that? It's Wisconsin. Basements are just a thing houses have. That's the whole normal part. I wanted you to have it because everything after this point, I keep going back in my head to how normal that first week was. Like I'm trying to find the exact moment it stopped being normal, and I genuinely can't pin it down to one single thing. It was more like a dimmer switch than a light switch. The boot print was day 9. Like I said, I stared at it, couldn't explain it, and moved on because we had actual work to do, and I didn't want to spend the day being spooked over a footprint that probably had some explanation. A hunter cutting through, whatever. Day 10, Copper wouldn't go near cabin 7. This dog would run into a wasp nest without thinking twice. Genuinely not the smartest animal. Real sweet but dumb as a bag of hammers. But when Rich walked towards 7 to check the chimney, Copper planted his feet about 30 yards out and would not move. Rich had to carry him back to cabin 1. Rich laughed about it. Said maybe there was a porcupine denned up under there. Dogs hate porcupines. That made sense to me at the time. I didn't think about it again for 2 days. Day 11, I noticed the wood stacked by cabin 7 had been rearranged. Not knocked over, not scattered, rearranged, like somebody had taken the split logs and stacked them back up, but slightly wrong, off from how I'd left them the day before when I'd been fixing the porch step. I remember standing there doing that thing where you try to convince yourself you're misremembering. Maybe I stacked it that way. Maybe wind did it. Wind doesn't restack firewood into a pile, though. Wind knocks piles down. That night, the radio did something weird. We had an old battery radio in cabin 1, mostly for weather updates since we had no signal out there. For about 10 seconds, there was this sound underneath the static, not quite voice, not quite anything, kind of like a slowed down hum with something rhythmic buried in it. Rich heard it too. He said, that's just 2 stations bleeding into each other. And honestly, that's probably exactly what it was. AM radio does weird stuff at night, bounces off the atmosphere, picks up stray signals from hundreds of miles away sometimes. I know that. I told myself that. Day 12 was when things started stacking up faster than I could explain them away individually, which I think is the real trick of this kind of situation. Any one of these things alone is nothing. It's a raccoon, it's the wind, it's you misremembering. It's only when you line them all up in a row that your stomach starts doing something different. That morning, my socket wrench set was missing from the shed. Not lost, not misplaced, gone, and the shed had been locked. I remembered locking it because I always locked it, out of habit from other jobs where tools walked off. Rich said maybe I forgot, and honestly, maybe I did. I'm not going to sit here and swear on my life I locked it that specific night, but I looked for that wrench set for probably 40 minutes, and it never turned up. It never turned up the whole rest of the trip, actually. Not once. That afternoon, we finally went into cabin 7 to check the chimney like Henderson asked. It was a small one-room cabin with a loft, real basic, a wood stove, a table, 2 cots, dusty, obviously not used in a while. The chimney looked fine, actually. No real draft issue that I could find, which struck me as odd since that's the whole reason we were sent there. While Rich checked the stovepipe, I noticed a trapdoor in the floor near the back corner, half covered by a rug that had been pushed slightly aside. That would be the cellar Henderson told us to leave alone. I want to be honest, I almost opened it right then. Just curiosity, nothing more. But Rich called me over to help him with the pipe, and I forgot about it, or told myself I'd look later, and we left before dark like always. That night Copper wouldn't settle. Kept getting up, going to the window, whining low, then coming back to the bed, over and over, for maybe 2 hours. Rich finally let him outside to pee, thinking that was the issue. Copper wouldn't go past the porch steps, just stood there staring off toward the tree line behind cabin 1, hackles up. This low, continuous growl I'd genuinely never heard him make before, not even at other dogs. I stood next to Rich on that porch, looking where the dog was looking. Trees, dark, nothing else. But I got this feeling, and I know how this sounds, I got the feeling that something was looking back. Not a sound, not a shape, just this pressure. Like when you can tell someone's behind you in a room even before you turn around. I've felt that before in normal situations. We all have. Usually it's nothing. This time it didn't go away when I turned around. It just kind of sat there. We went back inside. Neither of us said much. Rich made a joke about the dog seeing a deer, and I laughed because that's what you do, but neither of us really believed it, I don't think. Even then. Day 13, Henderson's wife called the office line, which barely worked out there but occasionally got a call through to check on progress. Rich talked to her since I was up on cabin 5's roof clearing gutters. When he hung up, he came and found me and said something that stuck with me. He said, I asked her about the cellar under 7. She got real quiet and said, just don't go down there and don't tell her husband I asked. I asked him what he thought that meant, and he shrugged. Said maybe there was mold or asbestos or something they didn't want to deal with, some liability thing, and that honestly made sense. Old cabins have all kinds of issues owners don't want touched. I bought that explanation for about 6 more hours. That evening, while Rich was making dinner, I walked down to check on the dock sections we'd stacked on shore, just a habit thing. Make sure nothing had shifted. It was getting dark, that blue kind of dark before it's fully night. And out across the water, on the far side of the lake where there's nothing but woods, no cabins, no road, I saw a light. Small, steady, not flickering like a fire, more like a flashlight or a lantern, just sitting there in the tree line. I watched it for maybe a minute. It didn't move. Then it went out. I told Rich about it over dinner, and he said, probably a hunter camping out there. Which, fine, plausible. People do that. Except neither of us had seen a truck on the road all week, and that side of the lake, from what Henderson had told us, wasn't accessible by vehicle at all. You'd have had to hike in a couple miles through brush with no trail. Who does that in October with a lantern? Day 14 is when I stopped being able to explain things away. I woke up around 3 a.m. to Copper barking. Real barking. Not the growl from before. Full aggressive barking. And Rich swearing, trying to calm him down. I got up and looked out the window of my room, which faced toward cabin 7 in the distance. You could just make out its dark shape through the trees in daylight. Not usually at night. There'd be no reason to see it at night. No lights out there. There was a light on in cabin 7. Just one window. A dim orange glow. Like a lantern or a candle. We had no reason to have left a light on. We hadn't been in there since day 12. And there was no power run to that cabin anyway. None of the cabins had power turned on for the season yet. That was one of our jobs for later in the week, flipping breakers cabin by cabin as we finished winterizing each one and confirmed no leaks. I stood at that window for probably 10 minutes. Rich came in, still holding Copper's collar, saw my face, and looked where I was looking. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he said, "That's not possible," which is a really unsettling thing to hear your friend say in the middle of the night. We did not go check it out. I want to be clear about that because I think in movies the guy always goes to check, and we did not do that. We're not idiots, or at least we weren't that idiot. We locked the doors of cabin 1, which had never once occurred to us to lock before that week, and we sat up with the lights on until it got light outside. Copper never fully calmed down, just kind of vibrated on the floor between us the whole time. By morning, thinking about it in daylight the way you do, we half convinced ourselves it had been a trick of moonlight on a window, or headlights from the county road reflecting weirdly through trees at just the right angle Stuff like that happens. Angles do strange things at night. We walked out to cabin 7 together, in daylight. Both of us. Neither one of us willing to go alone, and I want you to understand how insane that is for two adult men doing manual labor, that we needed each other just to walk 200 yards down a dirt path in broad daylight. Cabin 7 looked exactly like it had before. No candle, no lantern, nothing burned, no wax, no soot marks, nothing to explain a light we both clearly saw. The trapdoor in the corner, though, the rug that had been half covering it before, was now fully pulled back, folded to the side, neat, deliberate. That's when I noticed the wrench set, my missing socket wrench set, sitting on the table in cabin 7 in a neat row, organized by size, largest to smallest, laid out like a display. I did not put that there. We should have left that day. I've thought about that more than almost anything else in this story. That we had a truck, we had a functioning vehicle, we could have driven the 2 miles out to the highway and been in a motel by lunchtime. We didn't. And honestly, the reason we didn't is kind of embarrassing. It was money. Rich needed this job. I needed this job. We'd both told Henderson 3 weeks, and neither of us wanted to be the guy who bailed on a paycheck over what could, in the light of day, still theoretically be explained as somebody messing with us. A prank, a squatter, something human and mundane that we could handle if we just stuck together. So we made a plan instead of leaving. We'd finish the job during daylight hours only. Work in cabin 7 last, do it together, never split up, and get out before dark every single day going forward. We also, and I'm not proud of this, we also decided to look in that cellar. Both of us wanted to know what Henderson didn't want us to see, because at that point it felt less like nosiness and more like we needed to know what we were dealing with. We pried the trapdoor open around noon. Plenty of light coming through the cabin windows. Wooden stairs led down into a dirt floor cellar. Small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. Cool, and it smelled like damp earth and something else underneath that. Something organic that neither of us wanted to name out loud. There was a cot down there. An honest-to-God cot with a sleeping bag on it, folded neat, a camp lantern, the kind that runs on batteries, sitting on an overturned crate that was being used as a table. Some canned food stacked against the wall, the labels facing out, organized. And on that crate, next to the lantern, a spiral notebook. I want to describe the notebook carefully because it's the part of this story that still gets me the worst, worse than the light in the window, worse than the boot print. The handwriting inside was small, cramped, and it wasn't random rambling. It was organized like a log. Dates. Not this year's dates. Going back, based on what I could tell, at least 2 prior seasons, maybe more. Pages and pages of entries. Most entries were just observations. Times. 6:47 they leave for the dock. Dog does not like me near cabin 1, adjusting route. New caretaker this year, heavier, slower than last one. That last line, I read it probably 4 times before it landed. Last one. Meaning there'd been someone before us. Meaning whoever wrote this had been watching caretakers, plural, across multiple seasons and taking notes on our habits like you'd track an animal's patterns before a hunt. There was a page with a rough, hand-drawn map of the property, our schedule marked out in little notes, when we usually broke for lunch, when Rich usually walked Copper down by the water. There was a page that just had my name on it, not my full name, just a first name I'd mentioned once, out loud, on the dock, to Rich. 3 days earlier, a conversation I was sure nobody else could have heard because we were half a mile from anywhere. Rich found the last entry before I did. He didn't say anything, just turned the notebook toward me with a look on his face I'd never seen on him before. Not scared exactly, more like the specific blankness people get when their brain hasn't caught up to what their eyes are telling them. The last entry, dated that morning, day 14, said, "Enjoyed the tools. We'll return them properly organized. They are careful now, which is good. Careful is more interesting. I'm not going to pretend we handled this smoothly. We didn't. Rich dropped the notebook, physically dropped it, and said we needed to leave right now, and I agreed, and we went up those cellar stairs faster than I've moved in my life before or since. Here's the thing though, and this is the part that still messes with me. Between cabin 7 and cabin 1, along that same path we'd walked a dozen times, Copper, who Rich had left tied up back at cabin 1 because the dog wouldn't come near 7 anymore, Copper was going insane. We could hear him barking from 200 yards out, and when we got close enough to see, he wasn't barking at us. He was barking at the woods on the far side of cabin 1, the same tree-line direction he'd been fixated on the night before. We didn't stop to investigate. We threw our stuff in the truck. We did not pack carefully. I left half my clothes in that cabin and never went back for them. And we got Copper and got in the truck and drove that 2 miles of gravel road faster than was smart. I remember watching the mirrors the whole way, not for headlights. There was nothing behind us that we could see, just watching because I couldn't make myself stop. We called Henderson from a gas station on the highway. Rich did the talking because I honestly couldn't get my voice steady enough. Henderson didn't sound surprised. That's the detail that has haunted me more than almost anything else in this whole story. He didn't ask what happened. He asked if we were okay, said he'd send someone else to finish, and when Rich pushed him, asked him point blank what was down in that cellar and why he told us to stay away from it, Henderson went quiet for a long few seconds and then said, "The last 2 guys who worked that job quit early too. I should have told you. I'm sorry." That's it. That's all he'd say. We drove home that night, didn't sleep in a hotel, didn't sleep at all really, just drove straight through. 6 hours, taking turns. Copper curled up between us the whole way, not making a sound, which somehow was worse than the barking. I never went back to Rain Lake Cabins. I don't know for sure what happened to the property. I stopped following up on purpose, but Rich looked it up a couple years later out of curiosity and said the listing showed it under new ownership, different name, and cabin 7 wasn't on the site anymore at all. Like it had been removed from the map entirely. No explanation, just gone from the listing like it never existed. We got half our pay. Henderson mailed a check and never called again. And honestly, I didn't want him to. I think about that notebook a lot. More than I think I should for something that happened almost a decade ago now. Not the boot print, not the light in the window, the notebook. The idea that someone or something wearing the shape of a someone had been quietly logging caretakers for multiple seasons, learning our patterns, deciding we were careful, and that careful was more interesting, like this was a game with rules only one side understood. I looked up missing persons for that county a while back. One late night when I probably shouldn't have. Found a name from 4 years before we ever took that job. A guy in his 20s who'd been doing seasonal maintenance work up in that part of Wisconsin and was never found. Local paper said foul play wasn't suspected, no evidence of anything. He just stopped showing up one week, and his truck was found still parked at a property that wasn't named in the article. I can't prove it was Rain Lake. I've never been able to prove it, but I think about it. Rich doesn't talk about that trip anymore. Last time I brought it up, a few years back, he just said, "I still keep Copper's old collar on my dresser," which wasn't an answer to anything I'd asked, and I didn't push it. Copper passed away in 2019. Old age, nothing weird. And I think that's the one clean, uncomplicated fact I have left from that whole stretch of my life. I still don't know what was in those woods. I don't know if it was a person. And honestly, given the notebook, given how organized and patient it all was, I think it probably was a person. Just one who'd been living out there long enough and alone enough that whatever he'd become didn't fit the word person anymore. in any way that made me feel better about it. The last thing I'll tell you is this. A few months after we got back, I was cleaning out my truck and found one of my missing sockets, the 9/16, wedged down in the seat track where it must have fallen out when we were throwing our gear in that last night. I don't know how it got there instead of staying in that neat little organized row on the table in cabin 7 with the rest of the set. I've turned that over in my head more times than I can count, and I've never landed on an explanation that doesn't make my skin crawl a little. Maybe he'd meant for me to keep one. I don't know why that thought is the one that keeps me up sometimes. More than the light, more than the notebook, more than any of it, but it is.